Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Be Sure to Pay Your IT Help. I had been working at a computer repair shop on a commission-based system. We would get PCs in and the techs would not get paid until the repair work was paid for, and if the client did not pay for the work performed, the shop would take possession after a time and resell the equipment. It was not uncommon for the techs to be screwed out of work they had done. To make this job sound even more appealing, the shop owner would throw PCs from his friends and family to fix which was not paid work. I was looking forward to a pretty big check due to just cranking out the repairs, but I found out that these were all friends of the owners, so I worked for free those 2 weeks. One of the things that we do is pull the HDs and create a complete image of the whole drive for archival protection to be wiped after the job is done. Turns out that the owner of the computer shop and his wife were part of the swingers community and were hosting a small but local swingers site that they ran off of the notebook they brought in for repairs. I grabbed the hard drive and told the owner that he needed to pay me for the work I had done. The owner fired me on the spot. I had grabbed my tools and I walked out the door without realizing I had the HD in my hand. The owner had built a reputation in the small town it was located in for being a good Christian business, and the owner portrayed himself as a pillar of the community. I happened to get the information off the drive and I was able to get access to his passwords, plus close to 4 terabytes of pics and videos of their swingers website. Waiting on my 3 weeks for the last check, I decided that I would go scorched earth instead of looking for a payout. Step 1: his business. I had some time to look over the labor laws and found out he violated quite a few of them with me. We were treated as contractors, but he took out taxes and SSI which he never paid into the system. The other thing was we were required to clock in like hourly employees but were paid on commission, so due to the pay structure, many employees were getting well under minimum wage for some weeks. Step 2: his reputation. Having the sign-on information, I decided to do a few interesting things with the company website and their swingers website. I put a link at the bottom of the company webpage where I directed people to the swingers site they ran, and I changed the password authentication to allow everyone into the paid areas of the site. I also took down some of the pixelated pictures of him and his current wife and posted the original pics. It took them about a week to find out about all of this. I also sent out a mass email to everyone on the owner's email list to check out the swingers site. I also gave his ex-wife the drive to help her in her court battle. The fallout: long-standing contracts had terminated by his clients in droves. The Labor Board did an investigation and fined him for his rule breaking, and the IRS did an audit where they found further evidence of his crimes. In the end, he lost his business, his kids, his reputation, and his current wife because he thought he was too much of a big shot to not pay his IT help. Next on is titled, Steal My Parking Spot? Get Your Lexus Caught on Fire. And you thought it was an exaggeration? Nope. While not as nuclear as some stories I've read, proportionate to the crime, I'd say this counts. Year 2000. I'm living in a crappy apartment over a storefront, so parking was limited. Now, this was the middle of winter, and I didn't have a car at that period in my life, but my girlfriend at the time did. She was coming over in a couple of hours, and finding parking on the street is a gamble, so I wanted to dig out a parking spot for her out of the snow bank in the alley behind my building. I didn't own a snow shovel, so using a hammer, old plastic ice cream bucket, and my bare hands, I dug out a chunk about 3 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters to make room for her to park. I don't know if you can appreciate how much snow that is, but it was a lot of work, especially considering my lack of proper equipment. This isn't freshly fallen snow either, this is snow bank packed by a plow. Practically ice. But whatever, we do crazy things for love, right? But apparently, I had too much faith in humanity. I thought the cardboard sign I left in the newly cleared parking spot that said, "I spent an hour and a half digging this out for someone specific, please do not park here," would be enough. Nope. Wouldn't be writing this if it had been. Naturally, some idiot of a Lexus owner threw the sign in the dumpster and stole the spot. I remember it was red. I hadn't told my girlfriend about my plan to dig out the parking spot, mostly because I didn't want to look like a wuss if it was too much work and I gave up. So, I just stewed on it, imagining all the things I could do. My girlfriend ended up finding a spot on the street a block away, and we had a good evening anyway. She had to work the next day, so she took off around 2 a.m., and I stayed up until maybe around 4 a.m. The car was still there, and I was still upset. By this time, all the bars were closed, the neighbors were asleep, and the streets were quiet. I couldn't ask for a better opportunity to ruin someone's crap. I went outside with a bottle of anhydrous isopropanol I kept around as a solvent, doused the car's tires, and set them on fire. I nabbed the cardboard sign from the dumpster and used it to quickly scrape the snow and cover my tracks, then took it back inside with me. No point leaving evidence behind. Over the course of the next few minutes, I heard bang, kapow, blam, boom, as the tires burst one by one. I had honestly expected the whole car to go up in flames, but each burst was apparently forceful enough to put out each individual tire, as well as blast out a sizable divot in the snowpack. Nothing happened until the next day, but police were eventually called. They were knocking on doors, asking if anyone saw something. Nope, sorry, must have slept right through it. Good luck, officer. Hope you catch the guy. I turned on my police scanner to keep tabs on things, mostly out of fear of getting caught. But there were no witnesses, and I learned the owner only had liability insurance. What kind of idiot buys a Lexus but not full coverage? I would soon find out. When I went outside to survey my handiwork under the guise of taking out the trash and being a curious resident, oh man, yeah, that guy was gonna need to get his whole car resprayed. The car looked fine structurally, but I did probably more than $2,000 worth of cosmetic damage, not to mention needing 4 new tires. I also got a look at the guy who owned the car, and the image I had created in my head of what a person would look like that would so unapologetically steal someone's hard work, was completely accurate. He was a grade A, first-class, board-certified, textbook douchebag. Orange fake tan, way too much hair product, leather pants, weapons-grade douchery, a decade before Jersey Shore was a thing. I regret nothing. Never saw that car again. Got away scot-free. Next one is titled, Fire Me for an Unfair Reason? Say goodbye to your finances. Treat your employees right next time. This happened a few years ago and still makes me giggle with glee to this day. I'm a 34-year-old female who has always been a bit of a tomboy. I like cars, sports, and reptiles. When I was 25, I wanted a career change and finally followed my dream of working in an auto repair shop as a painter, like my father always did. To start my education, I needed to already have a job at an auto repair shop as an intern. So, I searched and called a lot of companies to see if they had spots. There were literally several companies that laughed at me because there's no place for a woman on the work floor. Disheartened, I tried one final company who said he'd take a chance with me. I was thrilled. I was promised lots of opportunities to learn and a steady job after graduation. I started a week later, and the first 2 weeks were awesome. I learned a lot and was promised even more opportunities. He promised I would have 2 to 3 hours a week of private time with the resident painter for practice. Soon after, though, it went downhill. The owner had bid on a contract with a large city in our country to restore underground containers. I had to sand them down, put sealant on the edges, and prepare them for painting. Tedious work, but I did it diligently. The promised practice time never happened. After a while, all I did day in day out, 8 hours a day, was sand down underground containers. By then end of the day, my hands and wrists were numb from the vibrations. This, by the way, is illegal. You're not allowed to sand with a pneumatic sanding machine for more than 4 hours a day in my country, as it causes severe wrist and hand issues. After several months, the contract with the city ended, and I hoped my promised practice time would come. But no, it didn't. I was given jobs that had nothing to do with my education. I was told to do jobs that a contractor should do, like put rebar in front of the windows, repair the sliding doors, repair walls, and other small things. Basically nothing to do with my desire to become a painter. After 6 months of doing literally nothing that I could count to my education, my boss called me into his office. He told me he was fed up with my attitude. He made a mistake hiring me. I was fired on the spot. I was heartbroken and cried the whole way home. I didn't get it. I put 110% into my job, working hard, always on time, staying late if needed, and never complained. I didn't understand what happened and was pretty down for a while. However, several days later, I found out I was pregnant, which helped me get over my downness. We had been trying for over a year. So we were ecstatic. When the time came that my final paycheck should come in, nothing happened. A week after it normally came in, I called but was told to not complain, and it would be transferred shortly. 2 weeks later, still nothing. I called again and got a very irate boss on the line, cursing at me and calling me things I will not repeat here. I was fed up and contacted my lawyer. Here comes the revenge part. In my country, there are apparently a few laws that my boss broke without me even knowing about them. First, you're not allowed to fire somebody without reasonable cause. You need to document bad behavior and give the employee a write-up. After 2 write-ups, you're allowed to terminate. My boss never did this. Unlawful termination can end in a fine, and the employee has a right to get as many monthly pays as the employment contract would have continued if the employee wasn't terminated, which would mean I had a right to another 6 months of pay. Second, you must pay the final paycheck within a week of termination. We were now going on week 4. After the first week, an employee is entitled to compensation of up to $112 per day of not receiving their paycheck. Meaning, I was now entitled to at least over $2,000 extra pay. My lawyer wrote up a letter to my boss stating we would be pursuing my legal rights. He didn't respond. A week later, we sent another letter, increasing the compensation for late payment as we went. After a month of my lawyer not getting any response, suddenly I received my pay, no compensation, nothing, just basic pay. My lawyer recommended to go to small claims court, and so we did. Mind you, it takes about 3 months before you can appear before the court. He didn't even show up in court. But he sent a statement through his lawyer, saying how I was a horrible employee, blah, blah, blah. However, he had no proof whatsoever, but I did. I had my performance reports from 1 month into employment and 4 months into employment. And they were stellar. The judge saw right through my boss's BS and awarded me 1. 6 months of pay, $13,500. 2. 4 months of late payment compensation. This is because he didn't pay the full amount my lawyer requested, as was my legal right. About $13,500. 3. Legal fees, now about $3,300. I was paid the same week. He was then also charged with a fine for violating employment laws. He had to pay over $50,000. This resulted in the Employment Bureau, this agency makes sure companies comply with employment laws, etc., investigating the company. They discovered the building I worked at was unsafe. The foundation was unstable, walls were crumbling and tilting. He was told to make repairs, or they would close him down within a month. By accident, they discovered he was also cheating on his taxes. So, the tax agency got involved. He got charged with embezzlement and tax evasion for both his companies. He had to pay back all taxes he evaded, plus a 100% fine, coming to a staggering $250,000 over several years. He didn't have that kind of money, and after struggling for about 2 months, which resulted in him not paying his other employees, he went belly up. Both businesses shut down, and the building I worked at even got demolished. 7 years later, it's still an empty plot, and if I ever feel put down by somebody, I take a short drive to that place. And it reminds me, people will sometimes get what they deserve. Yes, my colleagues lost their jobs too, though they did encourage me to seek justice. They too were wronged by him. First off, he let them work in an unsafe environment, which he knew was unsafe. And after I left, he asked his employees to work for free as he had financial issues, which were later proven to be untrue, at that point anyway. Most didn't accept this and left the company. The ones who stayed did lose their job when he went belly up. I kept in contact with most of them. 2 went into early retirement and are happily enjoying it. Others have moved on and found better jobs within the week. I did feel guilty at first, but the end result, including my colleagues finding better employment, made it worth it. Yes, I did find another painting job for about 3 years, after which I got ill and am now waiting on a kidney transplant and also in a wheelchair. Genetics, not environmental. The kid is doing fine, he's 7 now. The sweet age of them being awesome and slightly annoying all at the same time. Next one is titled, This Left Me Speechless. My husband worked with a man, let's call him Cliff, and over time they became good friends. He was a very nice man, in his late 30s, and looking at him you'd have guessed he may have been handsome once. He had very blonde hair, beautiful blue eyes, and a nice build. One of those builds you get from working hard outside, not the gym. He looked much older than his years. He'd had a very hard life and it showed in his face. Cliff joined a swingers group. As you can imagine, he enjoyed it very much. He met a couple named Carlos and Diane, not their real names, and they became an item. I don't know if there was another female involved, I never heard of one. Carlos was tall and thin, curly hair and nothing that would spark much interest. Diane was average height and weight, very buxom, and although semi-attractive, her years of hardship were evident in her face as well. For a while, things seemed to be going great. Everyone seemed happy and there were no complications. Eventually, Carlos began to feel Cliff and Diane were meeting outside their little menage a trois and becoming close on an emotional level. He was right. From what we understood, this was against the rules, or at least their rules. A huge series of fights ensued, and as one would expect, Cliff was eventually booted out of the relationship. Carlos and Diane became close again and eventually began swinging with other folks. During the time Cliff, Carlos and Diane were seeing each other, Cliff met their daughter, Darlene. Darlene was 19 years old with big brown eyes and beautiful skin. When they met, she had just given birth to a baby girl. The baby daddy took off the minute Darlene told him she was pregnant, so he was not in the picture. Unbeknownst to anyone, Darlene had developed quite a crush on Cliff. She was unaware of the relationship between him and her parents. After the threesome's separation, Darlene reached out to Cliff, and they began a relationship in secret, still unaware of her parents' previous relationship with him. Soon Cliff and Darlene made their relationship known to Carlos and Diane. It was not received well by either, but especially Carlos. Diane came around quickly, her daughter's happiness most important to her. Carlos never really seemed to warm up to the idea. He always kept his distance. Cliff and Darlene had a small wedding, nothing too extravagant, but still very nice. Time went on and Cliff settled into his new role as husband and father. It was a walk in the park for him. He was very attentive to Darlene and he loved and cared for that baby girl as if she were his own. They even talked about having another baby soon. Cliff seemed really happy. One day my husband saw Cliff at work. He looked preoccupied and worried. My husband walked up to Cliff and asked if everything was okay. Cliff sighed, "Not really, man." My husband replied, "Do you want to talk about it?" After a long pause, Cliff said, "I started seeing Diane again, and she's pregnant." My husband said he knows it's not very manly, but he almost fainted. "Dude, are you sure? I mean, isn't she like in her 40s? What about Darlene and the baby?" Cliff told him, "It's for real. We went to the doctor and everything. She had the test, baby seems fine. We have to do something because she's already starting to show." "What about Darlene?" Cliff stated, "We don't want to hurt her, but we want to be together. Go somewhere and have a fresh start. She's gonna have a boy." The next few weeks were crazy. Cliff and Diane got Carlos and Darlene together that very same night. They told them everything. Don't forget, Darlene never knew about the relationship between Cliff and her parents prior to marrying Cliff, so she got a double whammy. Naturally there were fights and more fights, and over the next few days, more and more fights. Diane moved out of the house that same night and moved into Cliff's place. Prior to this night, Cliff had already rented an apartment without Darlene's knowledge. He had also moved most of his things over there, but Darlene being the airhead, she was hardly noticed. Cliff and Diane told them how they planned to move away and begin a fresh start. Neither wanted anything out of the marriages except their freedom. No one could have known how much Carlos and Darlene were seething. Cliff had a car, but it needed work, so he rode his motorcycle. He decided to get the car fixed, so that Diane and the baby would have transportation. Cliff had the car towed to a mechanic shop, and the mechanic told them it would be about a week before it was done. Sometimes when the moon and the stars align perfectly, it's not always a good thing. The mechanic knew Darlene through some of her friends. They were all sitting around one evening having a few drinks, and the mechanic mentioned to Darlene that Cliff had dropped off and was picking up a car. He knew nothing about what was going on and assumed the car was for Darlene. For Darlene, it was just the stroke of luck she needed. Darlene told her father, and their own idea of a fresh start for Cliff and Diane would soon come to fruition. The evening Cliff went to pick up the car, Diane of course went with him to drive it home. After all the formalities were taken care of, Cliff and Diane stood around talking to the mechanic for a while, telling him of their plans. The mechanic was shocked but congratulated them both. Cliff had his back to the street, the mechanic facing Cliff was looking toward it. All of a sudden, the mechanic's face went pale and everyone turned to see why. There stood Carlos, weapon in hand, staring directly at Cliff. Diane screamed, but before anyone could move, Carlos lifted his arm and shot a huge gaping hole right through Cliff's chest. He died instantly. Carlos took off on foot. Carlos fled to Mexico. Weeks went on, but the police finally captured him as he tried to come back across the border. Once in custody, he cut a deal. Voluntary manslaughter, 7 years, out in 4 with good behavior. Darlene was never charged with anything. She was young and the mother of a young child. Despite knowing exactly what her father was about to do, the DA felt it would serve no purpose to put a young mother in jail. We don't know what happened to Diane and the baby. Cliff was killed in a senseless fit of jealous rage. His son would never know him, his soon-to-be bride left to raise him on her own. He never got his revenge. Last one is titled, Heartbreaking Horror. A long time ago, I went to my sister's house for a play date with our children, who were close in age. There was a strange station wagon parked where I usually parked. When I asked her who it belonged to, she shooed the kids into the backyard to play before biting her lips together, closing her eyes, and inhaling an audible breath. I couldn't tell if she was sad or mad until she plunged her face into her hands to muffle her scream. Through shifts between sobs and seething clenched teeth, she told me the unbelievable story of treachery and tortured revenge. Unfortunately, it's a true story. The dark blue station wagon belonged to a man her husband worked with. She knew the couple, who I'll call Bob and Sandy, from holiday parties and picnics. They had 5 children under 8. Evidently, Sandy found out that Bob had been having an affair with a woman at work, who attended the same company events. They towed the car here yesterday, until they figure out what to do with it, she managed before transforming from sadness to seething fury. She couldn't believe her husband agreed, but once I heard the story, it was evident no one was thinking clearly. Sandy didn't just go over the edge when she found out about Bob's affair. An unimaginable explosion of grief, fury and consuming revenge drove her to put all 5 of her children in the car, give them each chocolate chip cookies, get behind the wheel, open all the windows, start the car in the closed garage and wait, and watch, as they fell into an endless sleep, one by one. She died with them. This wasn't an impulse. It took time, determination, and execution beyond belief. She left Bob a note. Taped it to the cookie jar. My sister didn't know what it said, as the police had it, but I can imagine. This wasn't a distraught woman's suicide, it was vengeance so savage she defied her drive to protect her children, murdered them to torture their father, the man she'd loved. I suddenly need to shower and shake off the memory of that awful incident. But first, I'll make myself a fresh cup of coffee and envision everything I'm grateful for. Thanks for listening.